NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village, offering research-based arts, music, fitness, and lifelong learning programs at their assisted living and Alzheimer's care community in Westfield. armbrookvillage.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, homegrown in Hatfield, Massachusetts, and providing energy savings for their customers for over 10 years. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later this hour, Nepalese theater and an artistic exploration of the caste system comes to City Space in East Hampton this weekend. We'll talk with director Rose Schweitz and performer Suraj Malha about the one-person production, The Tragedy of My Lakami, the second in City Space's Pay It Forward series.
And this week is Climate Change and Farming Week in Western Massachusetts. Later in the show, we'll hear from the first in the nation cabinet-level climate chief, Melissa Hoffer, from the Healy Driscoll administration, who we caught up with at Big River Chestnuts in Sunderland.
They're not just growing chestnuts there. They've incorporated all sorts of innovative agroforestry techniques to help capture carbon, and they're finding ways to let the forest feed us.
Including super cute sheep.
Yes. They also have sheep. Rachael Haas's meadow-fed lamb are grazing under the chestnuts.
They are the cutest. But speaking of climate change and farming, I'm in Egremont at April Hill Farm, which is the home of Greenagers, and with Berkshire Agricultural Ventures. And what is your name?
My name is Ben Crockett.
And you're hosting a tour as part of Farming and Climate Change Week.
Part of it, yeah. We're having an overall event to highlight how climate change is affecting agriculture in, Western Mass and the Northeast in general. If folks want, Sarah is going to be providing a tour of Greenagers Farm, a nice bonus and a way for people to enjoy this beautiful space.
Talk about what Berkshire Agricultural Ventures does with agriculture in Berkshire County.
Yeah, so the main things that we provide are technical assistance, which can take a lot of different forms for farmers, and then also microfinancing in the shape of small grants and loans.
Do you work with MDAR, the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources, for some of these grants too, or is it wholly independent?
It's all over the place. I think our interaction with MDAR is usually more supporting farmers that are applying for MDAR grants and making sure that they have the resources to, apply for those grants, whatever the details and components they need for that, pulling that together, making sure they have the expertise for budgeting, things like that.
Yeah, how long has the BAV been around?
Oh, I think we're going on 8 years now is my understanding, yeah. I've only been with the organization for about 2.5 years.
Oh, so you came on in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah, kind of I guess it would be middle-ish, but we've had a lot of growth and changes since the pandemic as well. Our team's I think we're at 9 now for the whole organization.
Cool. How many farms do you think that
come back to me.
Sure, no problem.
I would just say it extends because we provide service in Berkshire County, but we also work with farmers in Columbia and Dutchess County in New York and Litchfield County in Connecticut. So myself this year, I'll have engaged with at least 20 plus farmers, but probably I think as an organization, we're working with, something like 80 to 100 every year in different forms and capacities and depths. So.
Is it hard working across state lines like
that? Yes.
Whoa, didn't even get the mic in front of you before there was an answer.
No, it definitely, but also provides a lot of opportunities, and really it's figuring out how to collaborate across state lines. Each state has their own programming, but there's also a lot of programming that comes from a federal or regional level that we can apply to all 3 states, which is great because, most of the farmers around here aren't just like staying in their corner, they're talking to their neighbors and they're sharing resources across state lines in different ways. So it's challenging, but we can do things that are much harder for organizations that are just based in one state. Our limitations are changed in that way. And it's nice to look at things at a regional level. We're not just looking at the Berkshires because the Berkshires aren't just affected by the Berkshires. We're affected by the food community from Connecticut River Valley area, but also, the Hudson River Valley on the other side of things. I mean, there's very predominant growing communities influence what we do here and the farming that we can do here.
Speaking of the farming that gets done here, folks from Greenagers who are with us, and who are you?
I'm Sarah Montero. I'm the farm director. And I'm Iris Arboreal. I'm the farm crew coordinator here.
Can you talk about the scope of what Greenagers addresses?
Sure. We have 4 different main programs here. We have a conservation program, which houses our trails department. That's the oldest program we have here. Employs youth that work throughout Berkshire County, into Connecticut, up into Vermont, and over into New York. And then we have the farm program, which we'll speak to today. We have a trades program that has a summer build crew and works with schools doing carpentry specifically, and then some other introductory trades like electric, plumbing. And then we also have an education program. That program works more with younger students predominantly, does a lot of in-school and after-school programming through Berkshire County with the public school system.
Iris, you're participating in Greenagers currently. Is this your first year doing it, or have you done it for longer?
Yes, this is my first season, so a lot to learn. Yeah.
What made you interested in the program itself?
I came to this position after college. I was looking for work at a nonprofit farm that was educational and engaged community. So I was really excited about the diversity of work we do here and the ways to connect with community.
Have you seen a difference in who participates based on the projects that you're doing, like farming versus conservation?
One thing that I've seen in the years I'm here is that sometimes there's someone in the trails program who notices what we're doing on the farm and it thinks, oh, I might want to do that program next year. Or someone, we had a student on the farm who was with the farm crew this year who kept eyeing the trades program thinking, oh, I might want to come back and do trades next year and asking about that. So we're exposing all these different things and there is that overlap, and some people come into the farm and then they want to come back to it. There's definitely people who have worked with trails through years, and then there are those who come through introduced to something else and think, okay, maybe next summer I want to go for that one.
Ben from Berkshire Agricultural Ventures, Sarah and Iris from Greenagers. On September 18th, a program as a part of Climate Change Awareness Week, Climate Change in Farming, which CISA has listed on their site too. Was that a partnership that was planned from the beginning, or something that you guys realized, oh, we're doing kind of the same thing, why don't we cross-pollinate?
Totally. Ben? Yeah, related to the work that CISA's doing, I've been fortunate to have people like Stephen Toronto in our network, and I think we kind of started around the same time. And I know that they had done, CISA had done on an event a little bit before, but I guess it was 2 years ago. We were just like, Climate Week's happening in New York. It's a really great opportunity to kind of highlight the work he and I do around trying to help farmers adapt to climate change in our region. And we realized pretty quickly, we're not going to be doing farm education in September. Everyone that's working on a farm is pretty much as busy as they're going to get if they aren't already. And so we're like, how can we kind of lean into this opportunity and focus on climate during September? And we're like, well, finding these ways to reach the general public, consumers. I think he was speaking with you all on the show earlier this week, the work that he was coordinating with the college dining system. That's a really interesting dialogue that needs to happen more about how institutions eat and how climate is going to affect our food systems at that level. It grew out of those conversations, and the way that we've approached it over here is just trying to feature farmer voices. So we always have a panel of farmers and whoever's available, because it is a busy time of year, and we like to ask a wide range of farms that we work with. There's a diversity in our area, and just try to hear what are they experiencing, what are they noticing. Farmers of different ages and different experiences, different crop types, everyone has very different experiences, so it's kind of hard to understand what climate change really looks like in our region sometimes. So this is a way to highlight that, and then we also try to bring in some regional experts and just highlight how some of the either projections or technical ways that other parts of our food system and the way that we eat food are being analyzed and understood, and how climate change is going to affect them and what we need to do to adapt to that. There's a farm tour to start. The main event of the night from 5 to 7 will be basically presentations and some speakers and a chance to network and ask questions from the presenters.
So, Sarah, as a part of Greenagers, what is the importance of bringing your organization to something that's talking about climate change as an organization, especially that deals with youth?
One thing that Greenagers has is that, we're a nonprofit and we do work specifically with youth. That's our main demographic, main mission. I think if you're working with youth in any way, you cannot have your head in the sand about climate crisis and catastrophe. I think, like many things, youth today are far more knowledgeable than most of us older folks are, because we are working with a demographic that is totally aware of climate crisis. It's been there in their whole entire lives. And because we're a nonprofit, I think, I've many years with production farms, for-profit farms, we just have more room in the nonprofit world and working with youth and an education farm to try things, experiment with things, give time to some of the farm systems or methods or crops that I think support climate resiliency, versus when I've been in the for-profit or production world. There's just much tighter margins of time, money to give attention to some of those systems or opportunities.
Iris, are you going to be participating in the talk too?
No.
That's why you have to get as much out of Iris right now as possible.
There. As someone who is younger, clearly in a different generation, working with an intergenerational organization that's seeking to provide a little bit of buffer both for agriculture and for a changing planet, what has the experience been like from that end?
That's a great question. I mean, I working outdoors and working in agriculture where your every day is tied to climate, it can be a really overwhelming feeling. And especially existing in this intergenerational space where you have people coming in to the climate crisis from all different life experiences and perspectives, and seeing people even younger than me and how they're dealing with it and how they're thinking about it and how much is just kind of ingrained into this fabric of their lives and in my life. But I do think it's helpful to be connected to some of these small-scale agricultural techniques and approaches that acknowledge and ameliorate the climate crisis in small ways. So I think that makes it feel better.
What was working here with Greenagers with this cohort like this particular summer?
Oh, it was so wonderful. It was my first time working closely with teenagers for a long time. So I think I learned so much about everything, about myself, about work, about patience and curiosity and excitement and presence and all of these things. So I think it was really, really transformative to connect with people older and younger and find ways to work together, because I think you have to stretch yourself and stretch your idea of the world and what's possible in so many ways.
Later in the show, a one-person cast addresses the caste system.
That's cast with an E.
We'll hear about the tragedy of Mila Kami coming to City Space in East Hampton this weekend, and how the traditional theater form of Hoodkelly informed this very modern take.
But up next, the organization behind April Hill Farm in South Egremont. More with Greenagers. We'll learn their history, about their programming, and the collaborations both the Bev and Greenagers have helped with another farm we've visited in the Southern Berkshires.
More with Ben Crockett of Berkshire Agricultural Ventures and Sarah Montiero and Iris Arborio of Greenagers next.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM. We're at April Hill Farm with Ben of Berkshire Agricultural Ventures, Sarah and Iris of Greenagers. I went straight to process, but tell me about how Greenagers started, Sarah.
I'm so bad at the history of Greenagers. I've been here. I've been in this position 4 years, which has been pretty close to the beginning of this space we're in, April Hill Conservation and Education Center, April Hill Farm. But Greenagers itself has been around about 15 years. It started with a conservation and trails program. Executive Director Will Conklin and our development director Samantha Suiters were two of the original folks who kind of came up with the idea. They're both from this area. Will went to college, so did Sam. Will came back, wanted to find a way to engage local youth, give local youth a sense of place, give them a reason to want to stay in their community and engage in their community, and that's sort of where the seed came from. But what we're looking at today, this is the past 5 years of Greenagers.
This is clearly not, there's trails nearby, but this is a farm. This is a working farm.
We have the incredible opportunity to be on this. We're on a 100-acre historic property in South Egremont. This is our main campus, main home. We have the farm program is here sort of spread throughout. The trails Trails keeps their tools here and the vans here, but yes, the Trails program is often out and about. And then our trades program behind where you're sitting, there's our barn. They have a wood shop in the bottom of the studio. Our offices, shared offices are here. We have some housing on site. So yeah, right now we're further along in the evolution of Greenagers, but it started with just, a handful of teenagers, an idea, and it was a while before it grew into what it is today.
I didn't know about your trades program. I only knew about the other two aspects of it. So can you talk about the trades program that's in Greenagers for a little bit?
Sure. It's one of our newer programs, and through the school year, it has something called Pathways to the Trades. So we work with a few local high schools who allow students to get credit for being here during the day, and they work with our trades director and some of the trades crew who's around, and they'll do a variety of projects. They do some things on site. They've also done a lot of work off site. And then in the summer, we have a 6-week build crew. It's the same, as our other programs where they come in, local youth get hired and are paid to learn these skills. And so they've done projects like, I don't know if you can see it where we're sitting, but up in the farm space, there's a large outdoor classroom. That's something the build crew built over the last 2 years. And some of the Pathways to the Trades school year students have as well. They built that from the ground up with, lumber harvested from here. We have a sawmill. All all those shingles they milled and cut on site and hammered up there. So they built something for our local library in town, the South Argamont Public Library. They built a kids' reading room, like an outdoor gazebo structure for younger people to sit in. And so they do projects all over. But yeah, it's mainly around carpentry, and we have a great wood shop for that. But they also do more, do some introductory into, plumbing, like some other basic kind of skill sets. Yeah.
They did some irrigation with Oshni, right? So here's a good tie-in, right? So we worked with Oshni at Mumbets to help support Greenagers to help her put in irrigation system because she needed to upgrade it. And is it Scott that heads the trades program?
Pete.
Sorry, Pete. But yeah, he worked with Oshni as basically a professional that I think he's got plumbing background, and like helped her rig up a new irrigation system, which was great to see that collaboration come together. Plus, kind of neighbors, Sheffield neighbors, yeah.
And it was also, it's nice because our farm crew, our youth crew, would go there every other week to work with all the farmers at Moonbet. So they would do like a morning there every other week and get to know that community and those farmers and like help out, and they get to know the crew. Yeah. And then also, our build crew was working on the irrigation project. So just a cool way to be out in the community. And that overlap of our youth, I think it's always nice when our youth in different programs get to like overlap and connect and socialize with each other. So yeah.
And now we have connected the other farm that we have been to in Berkshire County.
Oh, great.
What are some of the things that the farm's growing this year, Iris?
Oh, we're growing so much. We have a bunch of beautiful beans, a lot of greens. We have kale collards, chard, cabbages. We're just finishing up our tomatoes. Cucumbers have ended. We had a bunch of beautiful squashes. And we have these gorgeous gourds, too. We have gourds of all sizes ringing the sides of the farm, and a lot of beautiful flowers.
What happens with the crops that Greenagers is growing here at April Hill?
A lot of them get distributed to our staff through our staff farm share, and the rest of them go to a couple different food access organizations in Berkshire County.
There's a staff farm share. That's the most adorable thing I've heard all morning, and we've been talking about kids on farms, so we're setting a high bar. What does Greenagers do in the winter?
We just keep going. So on the farm program, we have a few other projects that are under our purview. So once the actual vegetable production quiets down in the end of the fall, we transition into our community firewood bank. So we do that through the winter. We're a fuel vendor through Berkshire Community Action Council, and we do a lot of bucking of logs, a lot of firewood splitting and a lot of firewood delivery. And we also, I mentioned the sawmill, we do a lot of milling of lumber because once we move into the spring, we have a front lawn food program where local folks in the community can purchase a 4x8 raised garden bed, and in the cost for their garden bed, they're paying it forward for somebody else in the community. And we head out and do that April vacation in North County and South County with high school students, and start a lot of seedlings here and go back out and transplant them in May. So we have a lot of winter work. And then there's just the general work of tool cleaning, crop planning, seed ordering. Greenhouse starts in March. So winter feels quick. There's not a big winter window, but it definitely, the pace slows, the day's a little shorter. So yeah.
Are your programs different in North and South County for Greenagers?
Well, we have just a few different programs, for like our trails crew when they're out, they'll work in North County, South County, wherever, but they try to hire, youth within those areas. So if they're working on work in Pittsfield, they're going to hire folks from Pittsfield. If we're out in Holyoke, they're hiring from Holyoke so that people are actually working in their community. Our education programs we're doing stuff in North County as well. So it just takes place with those school systems. So, and then the farm is probably the one that's most South County based because we're on site here, and it would be really hard to commute an hour to get here in the morning. Teenagers already, it's hard to get up in the morning, so I don't think any parents want to drive them an hour down here. But I'd say, for the other, it's not that the programs are different, but they just try to take place within that community with folks from those communities, yeah.
So where is your program on September 18th for Climate Change Week going to be?
Here at April Hill, where Greenagers is stationed, and we'll be in there. I don't know if there's a name for the barn, actually.
Just the blue barn.
The big blue barn, yeah. With the big heart on it. We'll be in the barn. The weather's looking good so far, and optimistic we'll be able to be out and explore the farm as well just before the main speakers. I think I'll just emphasize that the event that we're hosting is for the public. So if anyone's interested in climate and how it kind of shows up in our communities, I think this is a good opportunity to learn more about that. And farms are kind of one of our front lines on climate change. So this is where we start to see the impacts more severely. Obviously last year was a really stark reminder, and we've had more reminders to our north and south this year as well. So, it's going to be an ongoing challenge, and we hope the whole community can become engaged with that.
If you really want to know about climate change, you ask farmers, because there's very few of them who will tell you it's not happening. Every one of them has seen it on front lines. Yeah. So why not come to a farm and find out about climate change from a farmer? Yeah. Again, if you want to find out about climate change, you can find more information at
BerkshireAgVentures.org.
And on September 18th, come and take a tour of April Hill Farm to find out more about climate change and how it's affecting the Berkshires. Thanks to Ben from Berkshire Agricultural Ventures and Sarah and Iris from Greenagers for coming and talking with me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
We'll link to the events at April Hill Farm in our show notes, but the whole thing starts at 4 p.m. with tours and talks. The lectures start at 5 p.m.
Soon we'll hear more on climate change and farming as we visit Big River Chestnuts in Sunderland to hear about how they're using the forest to feed us while capturing carbon.
And we'll meet the first in the nation cabinet-level climate chief from right here in Massachusetts, Melissa Hoffer.
But now it's time for an adventure in traditional Nepalese theater that addresses the inherent inequities built into the caste system and what we can learn from those lessons here in the U.S. of A.
We'll talk with director Rose Schweitz and performer Suraj Mala about the one-person production The Tragedy of Maila Kami, the second in City Space's Pay It Forward series coming to East Hampton this weekend.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village, offering research-based arts, music, fitness, and lifelong learning programs at their assisted living and Alzheimer's care community in Westfield. armbrookvillage.com.
City Space continues its performances from Pay It Forward grant recipients with a two-night engagement and a matinee for Tragedy of Maila Kami, September 20th through 22nd.
Building on a successful run at the Minnesota Fringe Festival this summer, The Tragedy of Maila Kami is a solo performance blend of dance, singing, drumming, and storytelling, all as a vehicle to explore the challenges of caste-based discrimination in Nepal. Written by Sahalesh and directed by Rose Schweitz and performed by Suraj Mala.
We're joined by director Rose Schweitz, a director, performer, and educator theater from Minnesota. She spent a decade in Nepal teaching theater and directing and performing with One World Theater. She's also a 2022-23 U.S. Fulbright Performing Arts Research Fellow.
Yes.
In Nepal alum.
We're also joined by Suraj Malla, an actor, director, acting teacher. He completed his acting training from Actor Studio Nepal and has been performing with them since 2012. He's also worked as a professional theater trainer at various acting institutions around Nepal, and they are bringing this production as the second Pay It Forward program at City Space in East Hampton this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
This was shown in Minnesota. You're based in Minnesota. How did you find out about this program to apply?
I'm from Minnesota. We're currently now based here in Massachusetts.
Oh, well, that makes it easier.
That is, yes, that is the connection. I'm a grad student at UMass Amherst in the directing program at the theater department.
Suraj, tell us about this piece.
So this piece is about caste system in Nepal. Also, like this piece incorporate Nepali dance drama, a storyteller called Hurke. So we just kind of like is a storyteller who is telling a story about a caste system, but sort of like going into the personal journey of this character called Mailakami, so who has been a victim of caste system.
You both have connections with Nepal. Suraj, what is your relationship to the caste system there? How did you experience that?
In Nepal, there are basically like 4 division. From the surname, you know which caste, which category the person fall into.
Yeah.
One category is a priest, another is a warrior, another is a merchant, and another who comes in a below, who work other lower caste. That's it. It's really a complex system there in the term of because it's really directly connected to the Hindu religion, and that's how the society operates. I am Malla, which means my caste fall into upper caste. That's it. When I was very young, we have a person from lower caste came into our house, and I was very, very young. And then my family serve water, and they are supposed to stay outside. And you serve water, they drink water from the glass, and you are not supposed to touch. So this is something really that struck me at that moment. What is this? But you are studying something different in book, which is this caste system is not good. Everyone is same. You read in book, but in real life that's happening. So that's since then I have been really conflicted about what is it? I'm curious about that thing.
I don't understand any parallels with the U.S. with that same thing.
Oh, yeah, none
You
at
can
all.
read in books about how everybody's equal, but then it doesn't necessarily play out, maybe depending on what your last name even sounds like.
Exactly.
Yeah. But is it outlawed, though, officially in Nepal? I know in places like India they have also tried to outlaw, but it just like they tried to outlaw Jim Crow, but the legacy lives on.
Yeah. It is outlawed, but people hold on to religion, people hold on to the system.
Part of what we are digging into with this play is an exploration of how it impacts everyone when you hold on to this system. Suraj and Sahalesh, the playwright, were really inspired by a couple of particular violent incidents that happened in Nepal that were because of caste. And, I think that's been a really important part of this process is bringing to the forefront these victims and these people who unfortunately are no longer with us because of this system that continues despite being outlawed and despite everyone being told this is wrong, this isn't how we want to live our lives.
It's really hard to actually stop cultural practices, even when legislation exists to try and curtail it. We don't know anything about that or how that works with not just Jim Crow, but in our legislative system. But
or I even think when, during some election rhetoric, immigrants being attacked on the street or during the COVID pandemic, people from Asia being attacked on the street, the rhetoric behind all of these things is more pervasive than whatever laws may have even existed at one time.
Yeah, and it gets hard to enforce when the cultural standards of the people who are supposed to be enforcing those laws tells them to do something different as well. But I'm curious if, similarly to the U.S., there are tales of people moving between castes that people hold on to in the same way that we do.
We have the model immigrant myth in this country and things of that nature,
Yeah, and the idea of the misplaced millionaire, or displaced millionaire, rather.
That's so interesting. Nothing immediately comes to mind, but I think actually something that is good and that a good thing that's happening in Nepal is that there is Dalit representation built into the government. Those voices are present, even if they're not present enough.
We're speaking with a couple of the folks behind Tragedy of My Lakami, which will be presented at City Space in East Hampton Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the second in the Pay It Forward series. We're speaking with director Rose Schweitz and performer Suraj Malha. Rose, we know that Suraj is from Nepal, but you have also been trained in theater in Nepal, right?
Yeah.
What brought you from Minnesota to Nepal?
To Nepal, yeah. When I graduated from college, I was a little bit lost. I had an English degree, and I thought, what am I going to do with this? And I was really curious about living and learning in other cultures. And so I went to Nepal thinking I would travel and just sort of learn the language for a few months. And I ended up finding a real love for the culture and the people. And so I got a job there and I decided to stay. And so I actually stayed for about 10 years. But through that, I got to sort of find my way into the theater scene in Kathmandu. I started doing research into a few different traditional dance drama forms, and that was part of the inspiration for this play also, because we were both really curious about the Hudkeli form. It's from the region that Suraj is from also. We were sort of thinking about how can we experiment with this form? What can we learn from it? How can it inform what we are doing as contemporary theater makers? I think one thing that the audiences will get to see when they come see the play is aspects of this form that's not really widely practiced anymore except in that particular region. But it's a really beautiful storytelling practice and musical community practice that we're excited to be able to be playing with a little bit. Part of the impetus to explore the caste system through this Hudkeli form comes from actually the writer Sahalesh. There's been many iterations of this piece, but the version that we're working with has a real origin story, like mythological approach to talking about the caste system. So there's not numbers or statistics or anything like that in there. It's really like a poetic exploration of how did this thing start and where is it now.
It'll be a contrast, because that story mostly is very fun and very light and bring joy and dance. And all of a sudden you just get into this very serious kind of like
It is called a tragedy.
It's already a tragedy. So just to break that heaviness, just break that and just bring a lightness, because there is lightness.
And that is actor Suraj Malha. You grew up in Nepal and you're using this traditional Hudkeli?
Yes.
Did you have a relationship to that as a performer before this piece, or is it something that you learned to bring to the piece? Is it something you grew up with?
I grew up seeing it. I wouldn't say I'm really drawn into it. I haven't completely understand that, but we are just kind of in the process of learning more and practicing, seeing more.
Mm-hmm.
You performed this at the Minnesota Fringe Festival. How have you had to change it for the space you're currently moving it into?
Mm-hmm.
In Minnesota, it was in a theater in round, so it was really the audience were round space. So we had design based on that space.
Mm-hmm.
So here also we are trying to bring same experience, but there's a stage already, but the space is giving us a lot of opportunity to explore. And obviously we just there are challenges, but it's really nice to explore and get along with those challenges. There's one hallway here. We are just trying to be that hallway part of our performance.
Cool.
Yeah, I love that. Breaking the barriers of what a theater can be.
Yeah.
And we are thinking we are trying to having all the audience sit on the stage.
Oh,
Stage
cool.
and
Very
around
cool.
around the just making all the spaces. So it's exciting.
It was so wonderful to have that space, and now sort of rethinking how do we create that feeling of having the audience surround this artist, because that's how the Hudkeli also is performed, is in a communal way surrounding the person, and they sort of bring all the people into them. And how do we reshape that for a super symmetrical rectangular space? It's just been a really interesting spatial exploration for us as artists.
Yeah. Especially because audience participation is a part of this form.
Oh, yeah, there's
right?
call and response, I heard, yeah?
Yeah, traditionally the Hudke sort of gets inspiration from the audience, from the wedding or the funeral or whatever it is that's happening in the community, and sings about that, and then the audience might sing back with him. And we don't have musical call and response, but there is participation in other ways. Mm-hmm. When you put a Hudke in front of a Nepali audience, the audience knows how to respond. They are used to that. They know what is expected of them. And
you
so,
put me in a Catholic mass, and I know when to stand up, and I know when to sit down, and I know when to kneel.
I know when the Lord hears our prayers.
Exactly. But you don't necessarily know that when you're a Massachusetts person watching Hutke. So we've been trying to figure out how do we still have that interactive experience without expecting the audience to know what to do already.
An interesting challenge. And I'm sure it's challenging the narratives of the caste system in an era where the rhetoric in this country could use some challenging as well. The performance is The Tragedy of My Lakami. It is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, September 20th, 21st, and 22nd, with a matinee on the 22nd. And we have been joined by the director of the performance, Rose Schweitz, as well as the one person who will be performing it this weekend at City Space, Suraj Malha. Thank you both so much for coming in.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Don't be afraid of participating if you go to this.
We love participation.
Up next, more on how local farmers are innovating to address climate change. We visit Big River Chestnuts in Sunderland to hear about bringing the forest back as farming.
All we like sheep have gone astray.
And yes, they are using sheep to lead the way.
Plus, we get to do an aside with Melissa Hoffer, who is the climate chief for the Healy Driscoll administration. We're the first in the state, the first in the nation to have a cabinet-level climate position.
Way to go us!
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, with support services designed to help seniors age in place, including a Compass Memory Support Neighborhood. More at armbrookvillage.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering co-op advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
Last week for our CISA segment, we were talking about CISA's Climate Change and Farming Week and how there was going to be some farm tours. And lo and behold, we're on one. Here we are, Big River Chestnuts in Sunderland, which is where I used to, for like a decade, pick up my farm share. And I would see Bill Corman from CISA, because he had a farm share here too. Now it's the home of Big River Chestnuts. Where are we going? Jacob Nelson of CISA?
So we are headed out into the field here, this floodplain field by the Connecticut River, to see some of the chestnuts that have been planted by Jono Neiger and the other farmers that are working the land here. And this is a cool example of a climate adaptive farming technique called agroforestry.
Where you get really angry in the forest. We're going to the tree of woe.
So mad at the trees! Well, when you think about what grows naturally around the forests here, are trees. That's what the land becomes when you let it be in the river floodplain of western Massachusetts. That's one of the strategies some farmers are turning to, is just growing what grows naturally here. So we're walking into a field of, these are Chinese chestnut trees, so they're a hybrid Chinese cross.
Growing chestnuts in New England, that was one of the first trees to get wiped out by pathogens that started surviving warmer temperatures.
Right, so the American chestnut is what is endemic to here, and that was wiped out by a blight. And these are chestnuts that have been bred using Asian varieties so that they can resist that blight and grow here. You can look around and there's some trees of different sizes here. They're planted in rows, and then in between those rows of chestnuts, we have other things growing. A lot of things that are okay with a little bit of flooding. One of the reasons that this is a perfect place to be doing this kind of farming is that it's quite close to the river.
It's right along 47 in Sunderland. You can see Sugarloaf right there in the distance.
Right. So when we think about some of these extreme weather events that have been happening the last couple of years to farms, especially with flooding, this is the kind of thing. You have perennial plants, you have trees. They're not going to be as easily wiped out by either the river overflowing its banks or super, super wet, saturated soils from a lot of rain. The other thing, you'll look down and you'll notice like we're kind of standing in a meadow and the trees are just growing up through grass. So there's no uncovered soil here that could either be washed away by a lot of rain or just blowing away. We're able to maintain soil health, and even as the trees are doing their thing, as they're doing photosynthesis, we're pulling a little bit of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and putting it into the soil. So this is a really cool farming system that is an example of how we can be both adapting to the impacts of climate change as they hit farms and also trying to contribute to some of the solutions. And that's why we've brought Climate Chief Melissa Hoffer here today. As we're visited by the farm dog. Melissa is Governor Healy's climate chief. This is a cabinet level position, and we're the first state in the nation to have a cabinet level position focused on climate change.
So the tour is already underway. So we're going to go and eavesdrop on the tour, already in progress.
I'm Jono Neiger with Regenerative Design Group and Big River Chestnuts.
My name is Elena Baum, and I'm the assistant manager at Big River Chestnuts.
This has been grazed, so we'll talk some more about it when we come up to the sheep, but this was grazed just a few days ago, and the sheep are moving through in this rotational grazing system. The fruit rows that we've already harvested a month or so ago, blackcurrant and elderberry, and then aronia is the other fruit bush there that's sort of losing their leaves. So we've got small fruit that are more in the medicinal, nutritional arena. They're sort of niche markets that we're also trying to develop and expand the potential of perennial cropping, the different kinds of perennial crops that could be part of these integrated cropping systems. Farming has this narrowed down a little bit, and I think within our area here there's been a lot of exciting expansion and exploration of grain CSA or winter shares and this and that, but the tree crop, perennial crop, is really just beginning to unfold. So you can see the burrs on the trees. They're just starting to open right now. These are, as I said, year 7, just coming into production.
Most of the seedlings here come from Route 9 Cooperative and Empire Chestnuts in Ohio. There's 2 major sources in Ohio where the farmers there have been growing the chestnuts for, well, one of the earliest trees that we still collect seed from is from 1965, and they've been tracking and monitoring different metrics about precociousness, how easily the chestnuts fall from the burr, the flavor, harvesting, timber form, and some of those trees have been tracked about how likely their seedling is to match their characteristics. Those have been progeny tested. We try to then continue that selection process because the farmers are also involved. So we're continuing to track which seedlings are performing in these soils, as we talked about, so site specific about what could perform well in different areas.
There are a few diseases. There's a weevil that gets into the nuts, but it's relatively low, the pest pressure. The probably bigger issue is the animals that want to come and eat the nuts.
That's what I was wondering about.
Yeah. We're in a really interesting area here where we don't have to do a lot of deer protection, just because we're down in the valley with a lot of open land, a lot of hunters with guns. There's not as much deer here, but we're anticipating that word will get out. That's why, Cricket, get on your job there.
Cricket's the dog. Turns out chestnuts look like tribbles from Star Trek.
I want these things off the ship. I don't care if it takes every man we've got. I want them off the ship.
Aye, they're into the machinery, all right.
Oh yeah, have you never seen one raw or on a tree?
Never on a tree.
Yeah, they're like, they look like koosh balls.
Yeah.
Sea urchins.
Painful koosh balls.
This is our reduced mowing system here, where I'm not sure if we've even mowed it this year.
Because the pollinators.
Yes, because the pollinators. And there's trees, there's sumac, box elder, that's a cottonwood right there. That's 1-year growth on a cottonwood. Besides the pollinators, we're getting this massive biomass and rooting in the soil. We're getting this carbon sequestration. Then the sheep can come in and they're really taking advantage of almost everything here.
They love it. I mean, there's not a thing so far here that they won't eat, down to the thistle, down to pretty much every tree species, the poison ivy. And mowing messes it up.
Yeah.
It dries everything out. And the grazing helps with water retention. It also helps with filtration. Just think there's kind of is the thing that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
And they love it. I mean, because you get shade and then we can cut stuff down if they're not reaching the tops and stuff. They're also really good at knocking it over with their chest, and so they can eat the treetops and stuff they really love. Sumac is something that they particularly love. Autumn olive is something that they really, really love. Yeah, they're just really diverse foragers. That's why they're not in with the trees, because they also love chestnuts a lot.
Yeah, and then one thing that happens when we do what called this coppicing or a grazing system like this is then those roots of the tree compensate and they release under the soil, and that's where we're getting that carbon sequestration. So these woody cropping systems have the potential to sequester large amounts of carbon in the soil, not just the above ground growth, but a lot of that is happening down in the soil for a sort of longer term carbon storage that's a little less ephemeral than the superficial soil carbon. We don't really have the time to go into the soil, but this is one of those fields that's been in tillage for decades, if not centuries, and it's pretty compact. It's a silty soil, though it's super rich. We're in this incredible valley floodplain. It's been worked hard. So it's very compact, very low organic matter levels, very low soil biology. And so our role, the goal with this is to really look at how do we bring that back? How do we rebuild the soil? Let's come and we'll take a look at the river here. We're excited about the potential in the food system that trees become a bigger part of the foods that we eat in the food system, both for all these reasons, for climate resilience and carbon sequestration, but also because we live in the forest. We're forest creatures, and this land wants to become forest, and so we could be eating from the forest. We could be having these kind of systems where our livestock are grazing under the forest. We're foraging in the forest for forest medicinals like ginseng and cohosh and other kinds of medicines. So it's an exciting part. It's not meant to replace the foods that we eat, the annuals and other foods, but how can we integrate it and just sort of build more resilience?
Stephen Taranto, you came to the studio to talk about this Climate Change and Farming Week last week. Tell us what we're experiencing and who's here that of great import.
Well, we are being visited by Massachusetts State Climate Chief Melissa Hoffer. And, very broad brush description of what she does is to work across all the different sectors of the Massachusetts economy, say transportation, healthcare, natural and working lands, to look for ways to help mitigate climate change and also to support adaptation to climate change. And we invited her here today because we would like to establish a relationship with her in her office and share some of the ways that farmers here are trying to both mitigate and adapt to climate change. And so this is just an opportunity for her to get out into the field and see these different techniques and practices that are being put in place.
Hi, I'm Melissa Hoffer, and I am the Climate Chief for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
You're the first in the nation Climate Chief, right?
I am the first state cabinet level Climate Chief, that's correct.
And you're going on a farm tour that CISA has set up, and we're here at Big River Chestnuts in Sunderland. What's a big takeaway that you're going to bring back with you to Beacon Hill from what you've learned here on this farm?
Well, a lot of the things that I'm seeing in practice are things here that I've read about. So it's really terrific to see the alley cropping happening, which for your listeners, what that means is they've got a very active tree crop production happening, and then in between are rows of berries or fruit trees. And then there's a benefit as well because there is a neighboring sheep farm that's also here today and is being used to eat the weeds and other perennials that have grown up in between the rows of trees. So it's such a beautiful system. Here the sheep get the benefit of eating these clover and other food items that are great for them without having to bring in imported food for the sheep. And then the sheep are processing that and pooping, and that's great for the land. And it's a fertilizer then that doesn't require a fossil fuel-based input. It also means that they're still doing some mowing, but they're doing a lot less. So there's far less dependence on fossil fuels. So you get a whole bunch of benefits here, and let's just name them 3 to be super express about it. You're getting the carbon sequestration of the trees that are growing here, and also some of the berry crops like elderberry and the like. They've got some persimmons here as well, persimmon trees. You're getting the mitigation benefit in terms of reduced fossil fuel use because you have fewer fossil fuel fertilizer inputs coming and fewer fossil fuel powered equipment being used. And then the third one is you get a huge resilience benefit because by bringing in a high carbohydrate food supply like chestnuts, I think they are also growing hazelnuts here, a couple of which are high protein, other foods that will grow in our region even with the projected impacts of climate change. And that helps make our region more food secure. As you can see around the world this year, we've had very significant disruptions in food crop production around the world. That will most certainly happen here. We saw it last year in 2023 when we had 1,000 acres of land here in western Massachusetts underwater as a result of the July flooding. So helping to make this more resilient. And the thing that's really nice about this is you can see the relationships between the sheep farmer and the nut farmer. And then what we last heard was that there's discussion of some kind of cooperative of all the folks doing nuts here so that they could have some shared or joint processing of their nut crops coming in. So going back to thinking like that, how do we work with each other in community? And I think our thriving agricultural sector here in western Massachusetts can be a real example of that. The Biden administration came out with a greenhouse gas per ton number that's $230 per ton for carbon dioxide and $2,400 per ton for methane. So if you could imagine that Think of every fracking operation, every ton of methane that comes off from extraction and production is $2,400 worth of damage to people, and that means morbidity and mortality and also property loss. The EPA doesn't count all the losses. So it's very, very expensive to be spewing fossil pollution into the atmosphere. And we should be compensating people through a rational system that's market-based who are doing things to reduce that pollution and also taking measures to make our communities more resilient.
Melissa Hoffer, Climate Chief for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Jono Neiger from Big River Chestnuts, and Rachael Haas from Meadowfed Lamb. Thanks for taking us around the grounds and letting us play with all the dogs and sheep.
They roast chestnuts every Saturday from October into December at Big River Chestnuts in Sunderland, and you can go and try chestnuts roasting on an open fire. While supplies last on those Saturdays.
But also, apparently, you can eat the chestnuts right off the tree.
I don't know. They looked dangerous.
No, there was somebody who was getting the ripe fruits and the nuts were exposed and pulling them out and trying them out. And it was fine.
I saw them eating persimmon and other things like that.
I was eating the tiny kiwis. I actually had to move away from them. They're adorable and sweet and delicious. And they grow those on the grounds also, at least until the trees grow too big.
Yeah, it's fun to see. Feeding us from the forest and the potential that holds.
Indeed. On the next Fabulous 413, legendary jazz bassist and our colleague here at NEPM, Avery Sharp, will join us to talk about his performance of his album Sojourner Truth at Mechanics Hall in Worcester this Thursday.
Worcester isn't the 413, but Avery is.
Definitely.
Firmly planted in the 413 is Kimaya Diggs, who will join us before her show at the Iron Horse this Friday.
Plus, Emily Brewster, resident wordster from Merriam-Webster in Springfield, will talk about doing well versus doing good. Got a question for the word nerd? Email us at thefab413@nepm.org.
Oh, and while you're at nepm.org, maybe you can make a contribution, because if 225 people contribute any amount before 7 p.m. tomorrow, NEPM will receive an additional $10,000 from a group of generous supporters.
Which is great, because it means that we get to make more Fabulous 413s.
Yeah, and the fun drive begins tomorrow.
It does.
I'm Monty Belmonte.
I'm Khalees Smith. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.